Welcome to Champion Minded, the podcast for those who aim for excellence, not only in the sports arena, but in life. My name is Allistair, author, speaker, mindset and performance coach, and my goal is to help you unleash your unlimited potential and provide you with the tools to achieve greatness. Are you ready to become champion minded? Then let's do this. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Champion Minded podcast. I'm Allistair. Good to have you with me this week. What a Monday it has been already, because yesterday was the Wimbledon final between Novak Djokovic and Kevin Anderson. Kevin Anderson, a player I worked with. I've worked with Kevin for the last 4 years, almost 5 years now. But an incredible 2 weeks, and I thought it would be a good opportunity to put together a special podcast about Kevin's work ethic, about 10 things I feel have been the key to his success, to his rise. It's definitely something that hasn't happened overnight. They say that overnight success can take 10, 20 years. I think every athlete understands that journey. Those that are aiming for the top is that it takes years and years and years of dedicated practice. But what an incredible 2 weeks it was, especially after his preparation, which can sometimes be a disguise if it hasn't been the best preparation. And that's a good point to bring across, is that your preparation might not be in the right place, but if your head is in the right place and you believe in yourself and you believe in what you're doing, then things can happen. I've witnessed athletes go into events 70-80% prepared. They've maybe had an injury, or they've maybe had some disruption through illness, but they've gone on to have their best result. And that has been a reflection of their mindset, of what they've been telling themselves. And then vice versa, I've seen athletes who've been incredibly prepared, had their best off seasons, and I've witnessed that myself, especially in December, before Australia, and then they just don't have the ideal tournament or the ideal season. And I think expectations is one of those things that can get in the way. We spoke about expectations in one of the podcasts a little earlier, about expecting things to happen. Well, here's the thing: hard work pays off, but it doesn't always pay off in your time. If you keep putting in the work, you keep putting in the efforts, you keep staying disciplined, you stay consistent. That's the big word in high performance, is consistency. Consistency in your mindset, consistency in your habits and your routines and your program. That is one of the keys. But Kevin's warm-up before Wimbledon was Queen's, where he lost first round. So maybe not the ideal preparation, but it obviously gave him longer time to work on things and to get a little bit more accustomed to the grass. He lost to Leonardo Mayer in a tough three-setter, 7-6 in the third in Queens. But if you look, this is the thing with the week. I've never been a fan of players playing a week before a major, before a Grand Slam. When we're designing the periodization, we're designing the program of the player. I've never been a fan of players having to play a tournament directly before a Grand Slam, the week before. Now, things can change, and of course you have to be flexible in a program where, the player might not have enough matches. They need matches, so, there could be that possibility you get a tournament in before. But if you look, especially this year, if you look at the tournament winners on grass before Wimbledon, Wozniacki, Maria of Germany won in Mallorca. It's just gone off the top of my head now of all the tournament winners before Wimbledon, but they all lost before the second round in Wimbledon. So, sometimes the preparation you might have ideal preparation, but that's where also expectation can come on, which players put expectations on themselves, which is a dangerous thing. So, again, stay in the process, stay in the moment. Every day is different. Every opponent is different. Regardless of where you're playing, who you're playing, what the ranking is, what they did last week, is take care of today. That's one of the key things. Something that Kevin does incredibly well. But an incredible tournament. Obviously, Kevin reaching the final of US Open last year. One of the biggest differences was his body language, was his self-talk. I don't think, having spent hours on the court with him, hours with Neville Godwin, his previous coach, Jay Bosworth, who helps him as well when we're here in Delray, now Brad Stein, who's working with him, is doing an incredible job. All these coaches. I don't think there's been a huge change in anything technical or tactical. Of course, there has been some minor tweaks, but the biggest difference has been in his demeanor, in his body language, in his self-talk, in his continuous ability to keep himself focused. And, in Champion Minded, the book, I talk about the ability to keep yourself focused through self-talk. Basketball coaches, soccer coaches will tell you that a quiet team is a losing team. And I believe the same for especially individual sports, golf, tennis, squash. You don't need to be necessarily vocal on the outside, which is obviously a key aspect to mind games, doing the things on the court or doing the things on the field which can intimidate your opponent, because it is a game of mastering the mind and defeating your opponent, not just physically, tactically, but also mentally, knowing when to put in those come-ons or whatever it may be, the correct timing of that. But that has been the key area for Kevin, has been as simple as that. Showing positivity, forgetting the last play, forgetting the last point, and keeping himself mentally engaged by his self-talk. And that's something a psychologist that he works with down here in Florida, Alexis Castori, does incredibly well. And she's worked with some great players. But that is a whole team job as well. We've got to keep reminding him of these things continually on the court. And I think the big shift happened around about this time last year, July last year, after Wimbledon, when he came back to Florida and he came back for preseason US Open training on the hard courts. That is where the big shift happened. That is where we decided to, in practices, continually be on top of him with regards his self-talk, regards his demeanor on the court, regardless of who he was practicing with, regardless of, we practice with some 16, 7-year-old kids who are obviously at a high level, but he'd play points and be cheering himself and saying, come on, and you'd get some strange looks thinking, hold on a second, this guy is number 10 in the world and he's cheering against a 16, 17-year-old. Well, here's the thing, developing habits, developing a mindset is not a sometimes thing. You can't have your player, or if you're a player yourself, choosing when they should be being positive or when they need to be positive, or should I say when it's important or when it's not important. Let me tell you one thing, when you're aiming for high performance, when you're aiming for that champion-minded performance and mindset, it is an all-the-time thing, not a sometimes thing. Every practice matters. Every warm-up matters. Everything you do on the court, on the field, on the track, in the gym matters. One thing that drives me nuts is seeing players or seeing athletes with their headphones on at practice or in the gym or doing their physical training. Here's the thing. You're in your mind. You can't take that stuff onto the court, onto the field when you compete. You've got to get in your mind. You're not only training your footwork, you're not only training your tactical skills, your technical skills, you're training your mind the whole time when you are in practice. What you're thinking, how you're dealing, solution finding, what your mind thinking under pressure. These are the things that Kevin has embraced incredibly well in practice, because again, I'll say it again, it's in Champion Minded, the book. It all matters. It all matters. Not sometimes, all the time. So in the practices with Kevin, he would be wanting us, and here's another thing, he's coachable. We can talk to him as much as we want. we can talk to him every single point, and he will not roll his eyes, show body language, tell us to keep quiet. I can't tell you how many teams I've worked with, or how many sessions I've witnessed, not just in regardless of the sport, where players say they're coachable, but when they get under a little bit of pressure, be it in points or be it in, whatever it may be, they roll their eyes. They look at their coach in a disinterested way or a disrespectful way. You are not coachable. If you're acting like that, you're not coachable. A coachable player is open to feedback no matter when. Especially, I've always judged a coachable player of when they are receptive to information from their coach or whoever it may be that's helping them, when they're under pressure, when they're angry, when they're frustrated, when they're hating what they're doing right now, when they're possibly losing to someone they shouldn't be, and they're open to being coachable. That is a coachable player. And here's the thing. When do you most need help as a player? When things aren't going right. But when do you shut off? When things are going right. So, if you say you're coachable, then be open to feedback no matter when. And I can tell you, when you open yourself up to that, let go of the ego, let go of the frustration, and move on, that is when you're going to see your next level. Because it's crazy if you're trying to keep doing the same thing and expect a different result. It's not going to happen. The big thing with Kevin, the big change has been his openness to being coachable, being told what to do whenever. Steph Curry of the Warriors is another one. He says, I want Steve Kerr, the coach, I want him to tell me if I'm not doing something well. I want him to continually remind me what I need to do to get better. That is a coachable player. Steven Gerrard of Liverpool in England was the same. He said, I'd be obsessed with getting better. I'd want my coach, I'd want Brendan Evans, or I'd want whoever the coach was, Rafael Benitez at the time, to tell me what I was doing wrong. And that's been one of the keys to Kevin's progress. But anyway, I promised you I'd give you 10 keys to what I feel have been his success. Well, he's been invested, number one, he's been invested in the process and the journey from day one. The fantastic work that was done with him before then, obviously by his father, Michael, by the coaches he had as a junior, going off to college to Illinois where Brad Dancer is the coach there, another fantastic coach, highly invested, still invested in Kevin's career, but influential. He's had great people around him. He's had very disciplined coaches around him. He's been able to have coaches that have been able to tell him what he needs to hear, not what he wants to hear. And here's the thing about Kevin. He won't have people around him that are yes people. Okay? He wants people to tell him what is wrong, what needs to improve, but he needs to know why. He questions a lot of the things we do. And that's fine. Personally speaking, as a coach 10, 15 years ago, I probably wouldn't have been mature enough to accept a player asking me why all the time. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing 10 repetitions of this and last week we did 15 of this? He wants to know why. And that is what's made him an incredibly great athlete and player, because I'm going to throw this out here. He is by far not the most talented player I've ever worked with. Now, I've worked with world number ones. I've worked in different sports. I've worked with Olympians. Kevin is probably one of the least, and respectfully, and it's in the book Champion Minded, where I obviously asked Kevin for his permission, but he's not the most talented player or athlete I've ever worked with. But I'll tell you one thing, he's the hardest working and the most invested in the process. And this is a message to all young athletes out there, regardless of what sport you're in. If you want it bad enough, if you're invested in the process, if you're coachable, you can make it. Hunger. He is hungry to succeed. Here's one thing. He might have lost in the final to Novak yesterday in Wimbledon. He's number 5 in the world. But already I get a message this morning of when he wants to meet back again. You know why? Because he's not satisfied. Less than 12 hours after the Wimbledon final, I can tell you right now, he wants to know how he can get better. He's not sitting back 12 hours later, one day later. I can tell you right now that Kevin's either sitting on an airplane right now coming back to Florida, and he's thinking about, how can I get better? That is champion-minded mentality right there. Second thing, he's a scholar of the sport. He watches a lot of video. He studies a lot of video. He's obsessed about getting better. It's something where within his team, he spends a lot of time with especially with Jay, with looking at video and studying video. That's where Jay's incredible at as well. I like to compare Kevin to a Formula One driver, an IndyCar driver. There's so many fast drivers out there, and a good friend of mine, Enrique Benaldi, who used to race for the Arrows Formula One team, we had him on the podcast as well. If you look back on the podcast, he would say there's a lot of fast drivers, but there's not what separates the good from the great. The ones that you see in Formula One, the Lewis Hamiltons, the Sebastian Vettels, they are the best at giving information back to their team. Of how their car can get faster, how they can get better. That is what makes them great drivers, because there's a lot of drivers out there. This is something that Kevin has. He's great at giving information back to the team of what he needs. He can write emails back to us of 3-4 pages of what he feels about, and we'll probably get it, of what he summarizes the last 2 weeks as. That's what detail is. He takes ownership. He takes accountability. He doesn't sit back and wait for the coaches to come up with something. He's the driver. He's the driver of the program. We are the mechanics. We are the technicians. That is what we do. We supply the tools. We supply the information. But he still needs to drive the car. He's out there by himself. He's the one that's in his own head. And if you remember what we spoke about earlier in the podcast, is that the mindset you develop in practice, and get those damn headphones out of your ear. If the mindset you develop in practice is what you're going to be hearing 10 times over under pressure in matches. You become your worst habits under pressure. You better make sure those worst habits, the way you speak to yourself in practice, the way your self-talk, your negativity, your getting down on yourself, your inability to forget about the last play or whatever is irritating you, you better get rid of that fast. And you learn that in practice. 3 words again. It all matters. Number 3, he's highly disciplined in his lifestyle. He takes care of the small details. He's committed to executing the basics, like getting the right amount of sleep, nutrition, naps. One of the things in our program, probably about a year and a half ago, was we would have great morning practices. And some of those practices could be 2.5, 3 hours in the blazing sun here in Delray, Florida. And it can get up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, 35, 40 degrees Celsius if you're in European terms. In fact, one day we did a hydration test on him, and in 2.5 hours he lost 17 pounds of water, fluid. 17 pounds, that's 8 kilograms body weight. So if you don't hydrate enough, then I suggest you do, because hydration and nutrition is your mental energy, not just your physical energy. This is why I want players. Again, my job is sports performance, consulting, culture development, is understanding the importance of the small things that players actually look over. Hydrating is not just a sometimes thing or an in-a-match thing. It is a 24-hour thing. When you wake up in the morning, you've been sleeping for, let's say, 8 hours. You've been under a warm blanket. You haven't been having any fluid. Guess what? You're waking up dehydrated. The first thing I want my athletes to do is drink a glass of water in the morning. And you know what? Doesn't matter if you're an athlete, a coach, whatever you may do. If you want high performance in your life, you better treat yourself, or you should treat yourself like an athlete. I do. I have a proper breakfast. I have my routines in the morning. I have a glass of water when I wake up because I know I'm dehydrated. I have structure to my day. I have a game plan to my day. As a coach, as a consultant, I'm flying 90, 100 flights a year. I need to be on the top of my game. That means I need to take care of my energy. I need to take care of my performance. I need to be the same person I am at 8 o'clock in the morning with my athletes as I am at 6 p.m. in the evening. Consistency, that word again, consistency, energy. Energy is the big thing about me. It's actually, in fact, one of the next books I'm going to be bringing out is about the importance of your energy. Everything is energy. The energy you bring, the energy you give, the energy you have, your health, your exercise, your nutrition, your mental state, the relationships you have in your life, all these important things. But Kevin takes care of his lifestyle habits. He lives for the sport. He gets the right amount of sleep. He gets naps in the afternoon. I was talking about him having great morning sessions, but what we were finding was that the late afternoon sessions weren't as good. And it's important that you win your second session of the day more than your first. Here's why. Because when you go home, you're going to remember your second session of the day. Was it good? Was it bad? You might have had, and a lot of athletes will understand this, you might have had an incredible first session this morning. You played unbelievable. You performed well. You were in a great mood. Everybody was high-fiving. But then you had a poor session in the afternoon. That is what you take home. That is what you remember. Building confidence is like building a wall. Each great session you're having is you're putting another brick on the wall. You're building that wall higher. Every poor session you have, or every time you break yourself down, or every time you talk negatively to yourself, you're breaking bricks down in that wall. So you're building a wall of confidence, or you're breaking down your wall of confidence by the sessions you have, the attitude you bring, the things you say to yourself. Confidence is important. But we needed him to win that second session of the day. So we had to structure a better lunch. We had to structure a nap after lunch, giving him time to shut off mentally and physically. No phone, no interruptions, quiet room. We needed to win that second session. And that's what we started to do. That happened around about, again, this time last year, where he started to win his second session of the day. Moving on, number 4. He's developed world-class routines and habits in his game and his life, from sun up to sundown. He's a very structured guy. He knows what he's doing from 7 a.m. until 10 p.m. at night. He knows his day, what time physiotherapy, what time he needs to do his foam rolling, what time he needs to do he's very committed with that. Before he even goes to practice in the morning, he's already done half an hour at home of foam rolling, of stretching, of mobility work. Even if his physio, Carlos, who's an incredible physio, isn't there. Again, accountability, ownership, all these small little things. Kevin deserves everything he gets, his success. He's number 5 in the world today. If he didn't have those qualities of the extra work he puts in, he would not, in my opinion, be in the top 50. Respectfully, I say that because he is the hardest worker, and that is why he's got to be where he is today. That is what Champion-Minded is all about. If you read the foreword in the Champion-Minded book, we talk about being champion-minded is not about being gifted or talented. It's about your work ethic, your attitude, your effort, the things you bring each day, your accountability, your ownership, your feedback, your coachability, all these things. That is what champion-minded is about. It's about maximizing what you have and not looking for excuses or blame. Another thing Kevin has is his ability to embrace and enjoy repetition. He is brilliant at the boring. The difference between the good and the great athletes is that the good, they start to get a little bit bored at rep number 9 or ball number 9. The great are still locked in and focused at ball or rep number 99. As a coaching team, if we say to Kevin, you've got to do 2,000, whatever it may be, reps of something. I know that sounds incredibly extreme, and it is extreme. He will do it. He won't ask why. He's not looking at his watch to see what time practice finishes. He will do it. He does what it takes. He's an athlete that doesn't look at his watch and say, didn't we say practice was only going to be 2 hours? He does what it takes. It doesn't matter. I can't tell you how many afternoons have gone into nights working with him. That's the difference. I go to tournaments, and it doesn't matter what sport it is, tennis, basketball, soccer, all these events. I visit squash, and you got kids complaining about how long they're on the court, and then they tell you they want to be champions or they want to be in the top 100, top 10 in the world. Well, it's not going to happen. Reality, it's not going to happen. Here's why: because there's another 10,000 kids of your level around the world that want the same thing that you do. But how hungry are you? What are you willing to do? What it takes? Are you champion-minded? That's the question. But his ability to handle repetition is incredible. Locked in and focused. We talk about purposeful repetition. We talk about deliberate repetition. Not repetition of just shutting off and just going through the motions. Every ball matters. In fact, you'll see him sometimes just stop in the middle of a practice point. You'll stop in the middle of a play and question something or debate about how he felt on that particular stroke. Communication is incredible, and that's one thing that's been a huge factor in this team and this team's culture, is the ability to communicate openly as a team. One thing I've experienced in working some teams is that only the coach is allowed to talk or direct sessions. Not on this team. Everybody gives feedback, and everybody's feedback is respected. And that is something, of course, that Neville Godwin, who worked with Kevin last year, finished after US Open, and who was voted ATP Coach of the Year, did incredibly well, was invited open communication. For me, Neville is one of the best coaches I've ever worked with. He's now working with Hyun Chung, who reached semifinals in Australia this year, but incredible coach. Invites communication, wants to hear the feedback, and it's done in a respectful way. That's team culture right there. Especially, you think that team culture is just for team sports. No. Team culture is for individual sports, because there's a team working around that individual. And if you can't communicate comfortably, and everybody can't communicate respectfully in a great way, player, coach, trainer, physio, whoever it may be, it's not going to function properly. The best teams can communicate together. That's what Team Kevin Anderson has. One of the keys, one of the things that other people don't see away from Center Court Wimbledon or Arthur Ashe Stadium at US Open. Another key about Kevin is that he loves to practice, not only compete. He loves to practice and in fact, you have to sometimes pull him away from the practice court. Even, when he has rest days, he can even sometimes question that maybe he could go hit a few balls. That's someone that's invested and loves the sport. Here's the thing about life as well, and I've been spending a lot of sessions this year working with corporate companies on culture and lifestyle management, is that if you don't love what you do, you will not be successful at that. You might get some temporary success, but you will not have sustained success if you don't love what you do. And this is a message I give out to parents there as well, is that parents that are pushing a sport or an activity or a music or whatever it may be on their kids, they might be doing it now because it makes mommy and daddy happen, but it is not sustainable in the long run, even if they are very good at what they do right now. You know why? Here's the thing. A good 12, 13-year-old right now is a good 12, 13-year-old because they've had more coaching, they've hit more balls or caught more balls or whatever sport they do, they've played more music than the other kids. That is what makes a good 12, 13-year-old. Is that they've just done more repetition up to that age than other kids have. But the division starts to happen, especially in what I like to call the twilight years of 14 to 17. Do they still love the sport? Do they take ownership? Have they developed the right habits? Do they love it? One of the key things in working with junior athletes has been, and I've always told this to coaches at the conferences I do, is if you're working with a kid, how do you judge if you're doing a great job as a coach? Well, of course, we can look at results, we can look at progress in terms of consistency, but my judgment of how I'm doing a good job or how a parent is doing a good job is that that kid loves the sport or loves the activity more than they did 1 year before. Then you're doing a great job. You know why? Because you're fueling and you're building a passion for that sport, for that kid. Here's another thing, coaches. You're not coaching a sport. You're coaching a person. You're coaching people. The ability to connect first. The ability to... Great coaches to me aren't the most knowledgeable. Great coaches to me aren't the ones who've achieved great success with great players. Great coaches aren't the ones who are only working in the top 10. Great coaches to me, and I've witnessed some great coaches in places you will never hear of, and you will probably never hear of their name, is because they are able to stimulate the love and the passion in that sport for that kid. That kid loves being around that coach and loves being around the environment. If you're one of those coaches, you're a great coach to me. In fact, in my book, 7 Keys to Being a Great Coach, that is what I categorize a great coach as. Of course, energy, methodology, your standards, your ability to execute the fundamentals well, the way you invest in yourself, but the passion that you can build or help build in an individual's activity, that is a great coach right there. So Kevin loves to practice, loves to get out there. Wouldn't be surprised if one day after Wimbledon final, the guy's already arranging his next practice. That is how invested he is. Another one, stays incredibly positive and optimistic no matter what the score. One of the things that you might have seen if you watched the US Open final against Rafa was, even when he was match point down against Rafa, and it was a pretty one-sided final, Rafa played incredible, but Kevin defended one of those, or saved one of those match points, and he pumped his fist and looked at his box and said, "Come on." And I remember in the box next to us, this was in the US Open, spectators type of jeered and laughed at it and said, "Are you serious? You know, he's getting absolutely beaten up here, and he's now pumping his fist match point down." Yep. There you have one of the secrets to Kevin's success, is that no matter what the score is, remember what I spoke about practice? You develop your habits. No matter what the score is, no matter who you're playing, you always believe. Again, 3 words. It all matters. You always believe, no matter what. 3 weeks ago in Europe, there was a tournament where a player, tennis, was 6-love, 5-1 down. I'll say it again. He was 6-1, 5-love down. This is not folk story or made up. He came back to win the match. Why? Because he believed. He knew, or he had the mindset of, this guy, my opponent, has to win today. I'm not giving it to him, even at that score. That is a champion-minded mentality right there. Kevin believes no matter what. Even yesterday, the first 2 sets against Novak were tough. Kevin couldn't get going. Novak playing an incredible level. You know, sometimes that happens. But was able to get himself back into that 3rd set, stay positive, had a few set points. Anything could have happened. But hats off to Novak. Played incredible on those break points. Another quality of a champion-minded athlete, the ability to absorb pressure, the ability to play, I don't like to use the words big moments, big points, but they're able to be calm, collected, make good decisions under pressure. Where does that happen? Are you born with that? Nope. Skilled, talented? Nope. You learn it in practice. You learn it when you are under pressure, when you're fatigued. How do you learn it best? When you're coachable, when you're willing to listen to your coach tell you, this is what you need to do right now. No, but what? You've shut yourself down. You're so angry that you've missed that last point, or you can't believe you got broken in the last game, or you missed that goal kick, whatever it may be, and you just can't get that out of your head. You can't move on. Well, here's the thing. You can't move on to success if you're thinking about your last failure all the time. Period. Another one, small details. His warm-ups, Kevin's warm-ups are detailed. He will get to the practice court 1 hour before to do his warm-up properly. which takes around about 40 minutes every single day. His cool down is a good half an hour after practice. He spends 4 hours at a practice because a good hour and 15 of that is on recovery. At the age of 32, he understands that recovery is key. But you got to be willing to put in the work. No, he doesn't always have someone there. I can't be there all the time. His physio can't be there all the time to stretch him. He does it. He takes ownership of it. I don't need to worry if he's doing it or not. I know he's doing it. Again, players out there, if there's players out there listening, take ownership. It's your journey. Why should a coach have to tell you to be there an hour before or to stretch afterwards? It's your journey. If you want to sit on the sidelines because you're injured, because you don't want to do the small details, that's your choice. All your small little decisions, each and every day, add up. You're either making marginal gains or you're making marginal losses every single day. I spoke about that Kevin probably wouldn't be satisfied after yesterday, and I can guarantee you that he's not satisfied after yesterday. He's top 5 in the world now. He's reached 2 Grand Slam finals. He's still not satisfied. Champion-minded mentality right there. He will go to work with the team and want to know about his movement. We'll probably have lunch this week or next week and talk about things on the court. He'll have a meeting with the coaching team, the psychologist, everybody, wanting to get feedback. What did you see? What do you think? How can I get better? That race car driver mentality. How can I get this car faster around the track? How can I get 1/100th of a second faster around the track in this car? And he's willing to spend hours doing it. In the book Champion Minded, I actually talk about one of the Formula One practices I watched many years back. And if you ever watch a Formula One, it was Jacques Villeneuve. If you ever watch a Formula One practice, the drivers do one lap around the track, and then they sit in the garage, they work in the garage for about 30 minutes, 40 minutes on tweaking the car. It could be shocks, it could be brakes, it could be suspension, it could be hydraulics, whatever it may be. And then, boom, they go back out for another lap on the track, drive back in, all the mechanics gather around, 40 minutes, talk, discuss, computer, electronics, driver gets back in the car, another lap, and this goes on the whole day. That is the details that go into being the best of the best. Last but not least, kids out there playing sports. Kevin's humble. After his marathon match against John Isner, 26-24, he felt bad for John. He felt his opponent. He didn't feel it during the match. Okay? Conquer. Gladiator on the match. But he has compassion outside of it. He's a nice guy outside of it. He doesn't need to be a jerk outside of it. Highly competitive on the court. And this is something that Kim Kleister was amazing at. Highly competitive on the court or in battle, but just a great person off it. Kevin has no ego. Kevin is grateful. Kevin is appreciative. Kevin sends us messages thanking him for today's practice, thanking for our honesty, our feedback. He's able to have the tough conversations. In fact, on the day of the US Open final against Rafa, it was Kevin who called us, the team, to ask if we wanted breakfast because he was going out to get it. That's the guy he is. He's a guy that thanks officials. He's a guy that thanks referees. He's a guy that thanks the drivers. He's a guy that is mindful of others. I can't tell you how many little punks I see, and it sounds like a rant right now, but it's not. But how many punks I see at junior tournaments, cricket, rugby, soccer, tennis, who think it's their given right to be there. Where volunteers have given up their weekend, referees have given up their weekends away from their family, your coaches, your parents, and they say thanks to nobody. They complain about things, they make excuses, blame. They don't thank the bus driver. I observed, in fact, at a sports event, kids getting off a bus, and you know how many out of 30 kids said thanks to the bus driver? 2. And you bet that I gathered those 30 kids around to say, you will find that bus driver and you will thank him for the ride you had today. Humbleness, awareness. How often do you thank your coach? When you walk onto the court of the field, the first thing a champion-minded athlete does is they say good morning or good afternoon to everybody. Walk into a room, it's manners, it's respectful. When you leave a session, when you leave a meeting, when you leave a practice, thank others. When you leave a competition, thank the officials, the referees, the volunteers, parents that gave you the ride there, your coaches, assistant coaches, physios, trainers. Thank others. Make it a habit. That is something that Kevin does. Mindful. Humble. No ego. Grateful. One of the things in life that you'll find is that when you give up expectation and you focus on appreciation, that's when great things happen. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. It's definitely been an incredible 2 weeks watching Kevin progress. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there. I had some work that I had to do in Germany, and then I had some commitments back here in Florida. But just watching it from here and experiencing it on TV, a great joy. And I'm really excited about the journey, wherever it takes us. Every day is a blessing. I never take a day for granted. This all could end today. Where I am, I'm blessed. I'm privileged. I don't care who I'm working with, who I'm with. I'm grateful to be in the position that they've trusted me in working with them or doing whatever it is. But hope you enjoyed this one, regardless of what you do, be it a player, coach, parent. I hope these 10 keys helped you understand a little bit more about Kevin's success, that it's not just about talent. It's not just about how well you hit a ball, how well you kick a ball, whatever it may be. It's about your attitude, your work ethic, your champion-minded mentality, and being grateful. So until next time, guys, on the Champion Minded Podcast, I wish you a good week. Remember, the podcast is also available on YouTube. It's on iTunes. Please leave a review or leave some feedback for me. Always appreciate that. As always, social media. I'm on Twitter at Allistair McCall, Facebook McCall Method, and Instagram Be Champion Minded. So until next time, everybody, stay champion minded.